At my graduation, they called my name. The crowd cheered. Cameras flashed. But my father didn't move. He sat in the front row, arms crossed, eyes like stone. When the announcer invited parents on stage, he shook his head. No. Just... no. For a moment, I smiled anyway. I'd practiced that smile for years. But then, someone started filming, and within hours, what happened went viral. Strangers felt what I'd hidden my whole life. They called it shocking. I called it Tuesday. You ever wonder what it's like to be invisible to the one person you crave love from? Let me tell you, I was 8 when I won my first academic award. Best science project in the 3rd grade. I remember running all the way home, backpack bouncing, certificate clutched tightly in my hands, beaming with pride. My mom hugged me at the door, kissed my forehead, and told me to show Dad. He was in the living room watching Jason's soccer highlights on the local news. I stepped in front of the TV and held the certificate out like a treasure. "Look what I got, Dad," I said, nearly breathless. He glanced up. "That's nice," he muttered before turning back to the screen. "Hey, Jason, come look. You made the replay." Jason came bounding in, sweaty from practice, and Dad pulled him into a side hug like he'd just won the Super Bowl. My certificate slipped from my fingers to the floor. No one noticed. I picked it up and slid it into my backpack like it didn't matter. That was the first time I felt it. That invisible wall between them and me. Years passed, and the space only widened. Jason got trophies. I got silence. He got praise. I got reminders to be more like your brother. But I learned to swallow the lump in my throat. I smiled harder. I worked longer. I aimed higher. If love had a currency, I was earning it. And then, a week before graduation, the email came. "Dear Megan Dawson, we are thrilled to inform you that you have been selected as this year's valedictorian." I read it 5 times before blinking. I should have screamed, called my mom, posted it online. But I just sat there, staring at the screen, my fingers frozen. I felt nothing. Not pride, not joy. Just a cold, quiet ache. "Maybe now he'll say it," I whispered aloud. "Maybe this time." But even the hope tasted bitter. I couldn't remember the last time Dad looked at me the way he looked at Jason. When had he last smiled at something I did? Not a polite smile. A real one. Like I mattered. Was there ever a time? I asked myself. Later that night, while looking for an old yearbook, I opened a drawer in Mom's bedroom I'd never dared touch before. Inside was a stack of yellowed envelopes, letters tied with fading blue ribbon. Curiosity outweighed guilt. I untied the knot and pulled one out. The handwriting was unmistakable. "Dear Michael," it read. "Jason's shaping up just like I hoped. Strong, smart, competitive. I can already tell he'll carry on the Dawson name with pride. Megan. Well, she's different. Sweet kid, sure, but there's nothing of me in her. I guess some children are just distant." I stopped reading. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just stared at the paper until the words blurred. There it was, in ink. Undeniable. I was never enough. Not because I failed, but because I was never him. I called Uncle David the next morning. He used to live next door before he moved to Arizona. He picked up on the second ring. "Uncle D, do you remember the day I was born?" He laughed. "Of course I do. You were this tiny bundle with eyes too big for your face." "Did Dad say anything that day? Like, about me?" There was a pause. "Why are you asking?" "Just, I need to know." He sighed. He said, "She doesn't look like me. Doesn't feel like mine." I remember because it stung. I told him to shut up and hold you anyway. But he never did he? No, he didn't. I thanked him and hung up, then just sat there for a long time, staring at my reflection in the dark screen of my laptop. I touched my cheek gently. The same cheek he never kissed goodnight. The same face that, apparently, reminded him of everything I wasn't. "What's wrong with me?" I asked. But the question wasn't new. It had just been hiding all along, beneath grades, beneath smiles, beneath the endless attempts to become visible in my own home. And now that it had surfaced, I couldn't look away. I threw myself into everything. Lectures, debates, late-night study sessions, community service, student council. I didn't just want to graduate. I wanted to be undeniable. If I could be louder, smarter, more helpful, more involved, maybe then he'd see me. Maybe then he'd have no choice but to look at me like I was real. Sleep became optional. Meals, forgettable. My world shrank to checklists and deadlines. Every accolade was a brick in the wall I was building between who I was and who he thought I'd never be. But I kept the pressure silent. When the graduation invitations came in, I addressed one to my dad with care. Instead of just the formal printout, I tucked in a photo of the two of us, taken the day I turned 4. I was sitting on his lap, beaming, while he stared at the camera, stiff and unsmiling. It was the only picture I had where we were physically close. I wrote one line on the back. "Maybe we can make a new memory this time." I didn't expect much, but I hoped. His reply came 2 days later. "Don't expect too much. I'll come if I'm free." That was it. No congratulations, no pride, no warmth. I stared at the screen, the words dull and weightless. I started typing. "I just want you to hug me. Just once, like you hugged Jason after his football game." But I erased it. Megan Dawson doesn't beg. Instead, I shut the laptop and bit my lip until I tasted blood. A few days later, my stomach started to turn in on itself. I thought it was nerves, normal pre-ceremony jitters. But the pain worsened. Sharp, relentless, curling me into a ball on the dorm bed at 3 a.m. By the morning, I was in the ER with severe gastritis, brought on by stress and exhaustion. 1 week before graduation. My roommate brought flowers and whispered, "You have to slow down." I just shook my head. I don't know how. The doctor told me to rest, avoid anxiety, and stay off caffeine. He didn't know I'd been living on iced coffee and adrenaline since February. Back in bed, scrolling half-heartedly through social media, I saw a message from a classmate. "Hey, didn't know this was your dad. Saw him in this interview on Channel 7. I clicked the link. The interviewer asked him, "So your son Jason is quite the star. How does it feel having such a legacy in the family?" Dad laughed. "I'm proud of my boy. He's the heart of the Dawson name. My one and only." My one and only. He said it with a smile. I froze. Not one of my kids. Not my children. Just Jason. As if I didn't exist. As if I'd never existed. The bed felt like it was swallowing me whole. Later, Jason texted me. "I didn't know about that interview. Seriously, I swear." I believed him. We weren't close, not really. But he'd never gone out of his way to hurt me. He'd always just accepted the imbalance, like it was gravity, like it couldn't be helped. He called that night, unsure. "Did he really say that?" "Yeah." "Have you talked to him?" "I stopped trying," I said. "You should too." He was quiet. Then he said something that surprised me. "I'm sorry, Meg, for not noticing." I didn't respond. What was there to say? I turned my phone off and curled up with a blanket that smelled like my mom's old laundry detergent. In the drawer beside me was that same photo I'd sent him. I held it in my hand, pressed it to my chest. I thought of the girl in the picture, 4 years old, arms wrapped around a man who already saw her as other. She didn't know yet. She didn't know she'd spend years trying to prove she was worthy of the space she took up. Now I knew. And knowing didn't fix it. But it did one thing. It made me stop waiting. I wasn't going to be rescued. Not by an apology. Not by recognition. If I wanted out of this ache, I'd have to save myself. In the dim hospital room, silence became a companion I didn't mind. There was something honest about it. No forced conversations, no weighty expectations. Just breath, space, and the slow, strange sense that I had nothing left to lose. I needed an outlet. Not for attention. God, no. Just to exhale. To say things I had never said out loud, not even to myself. One night, propped up against a stiff pillow, I downloaded TikTok and created a new account, under a name no one would recognize. No selfies, no identity. Just stories. Using a simple animation app, I made a 60-second video with stick figures and watercolor-style frames. A little girl holding a certificate, a man turning away, a quiet dinner table, a photo in a drawer. I narrated it with a voiceover, soft, detached, matter-of-fact. I used to think if I achieved enough, he'd look at me the way he looked at my brother. But some eyes never turn your way, no matter how loud your light burns. No names, no specifics, just memory and motion. I posted it and turned off my phone. By morning, the video had over 70,000 views. By the next day, it hit 1.4 million. I scrolled through the comments in disbelief. This hit harder than I expected. I thought I was the only one with a dad like this. I felt this in my bones. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. And then, buried between hundreds of hearts and hugs, one comment stopped me cold. If you're Megan D, I know who your father is. My hands trembled as I tapped the username. A blank profile, no posts, no followers. Just that one sentence. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the screen, the air thinning around me. What had I done? It wasn't about exposing anyone. It was for me. Just me. I deleted the video, then the app, then I shut my phone off completely. But it was too late. The internet never forgets. Back on campus, I kept my head down. The whispers hadn't started, yet. But the tension lived beneath my skin. Every glance felt sharper. Every smile suspicious. So I went where people didn't look at me like a headline. Professor Hart was an oddball. Wild curls, ink-stained fingers, and a classroom that smelled like lavender and old paper. I'd taken his elective on storytelling and emotional narrative last semester, and he remembered me. You look like someone who's just taken a sledgehammer to their own house, he said when I walked in. I blinked. That's weirdly accurate. He nodded like he saw straight through me. Over coffee, I told him, carefully, without naming names, what had happened. The video, the aftermath, the fear. He didn't flinch. People who are denied recognition often build it for others. That's why we need their voices most, he said. You've spent your life asking to be seen. What if you stopped asking? I didn't answer. He placed a hand on the stack of papers beside him. Write the speech. Not for them. Not for anyone's approval. Write the one you wish someone had said to you when you were 8. So I did. At first, the words felt brittle. Fragile things I wasn't sure would stand. But slowly, they grew teeth and wings. They held not just anger, but understanding. Not just pain, but clarity. The speech began with a truth I'd only recently accepted. Not everyone will love you the way you deserve. Some will love you with silence, others with shadows. But your worth is not a mirror. It is a flame. We met twice a week until the day before graduation. He never told me if it was good. He just said it was honest. That was enough. That night in my dorm, I pulled out the old photo again, the same one I had sent with the invitation. I wrote one last letter to my father. I didn't plead. I didn't accuse. I just told him about the little girl in the picture. How she waited at the kitchen table on spelling bee night, hoping he'd ask how it went. How she kept a box of every award she'd ever won, unopened because they never felt real. How she'd grown up believing her love had to be earned, and even then, wasn't enough. And how now, she was done waiting. I folded the letter carefully, slid it into an envelope, but I didn't seal it. Instead, I placed it gently into the drawer beside my bed. Maybe one day I'd send it, or maybe not. The auditorium pulsed with silence. Rows of caps and gowns shimmered under fluorescent lights, and hundreds of families leaned forward, eyes fixed on the stage. Somewhere behind the curtain, my heart beat louder than the applause that had welcomed every speaker before me. Then my name echoed across the hall. Megan Dawson, this year's valedictorian. I stepped into the spotlight. From the stage, I could see everything. Parents craning necks, phones raised, tears glistening in strangers' eyes. But my gaze zeroed in on the front row, seat 3 from the left. My father sat with his arms crossed, legs stretched out, eyes expressionless. I took a breath. This speech isn't about achievement, I began, voice clear but steady. It's about visibility. A murmur rippled through the audience. There are people in this room who have spent years being seen, I continued. Loved loudly, celebrated with open arms. I'm not one of them. A beat of silence. I used to think I was invisible, that if I just shined brighter, someone, anyone, would finally look at me and say, there you are. But the truth is, light doesn't need to be noticed to exist. It just is. In the front row, my father's mouth twitched. Not a smile, not a frown. Just a flicker of something unreadable. I stand here not to ask for recognition, I said, but to give it to those who know what it feels like to be overlooked, underestimated, unloved in the ways that mattered most. I ended with a simple line. To every invisible child, your light matters. Applause thundered around me, but I didn't flinch. I didn't search for approval. Then came the moment. The host stepped forward, bright and cheery. And now, as tradition, we invite families to come on stage and share a hug with their graduate. Parents, guardians, come on up. All around, families rose, cheering, crying, clapping. Some ran, some walked. A sea of movement. I stood still, waiting. He didn't move. For a heartbeat, I thought he might. I saw his jaw tighten, his knuckles whiten. Then, slowly, deliberately, he rose from his seat, only to turn around and walk down the center aisle toward the exit. He didn't look back. Gasps filled the hall. Phones followed him like spotlights. Whispers turned into noise. I blinked hard, holding the tears where they belonged, inside. And then, footsteps, a presence, arms. Jason! He stepped onto the stage, wordless, and pulled me into the first hug he'd ever initiated. I'm sorry, he whispered. You deserved more than this. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The auditorium erupted. The sound wasn't for him, or even for me. It was for every person who had ever longed to be chosen, and finally chose themselves instead. Later that night, the video surfaced. A shaky clip filmed from row F. My speech, my father's exit, Jason's hug. It spread fast. By morning, it had nearly 4 million views. By noon, 10. And at the top of the post was Jason's caption. The first time I saw my sister truly recognized. It should have happened years ago. Comments flooded in. This broke me. Who just walks out on their daughter like that? Jason, you're the real one. Respect. By the third day, my father's law firm released a statement, trying to quiet the storm. But it didn't work. Clients pulled contracts. Review sites exploded with one-star ratings and biting accusations. Someone even started a petition to have him removed from a local board of education. And in the middle of it all, my phone rang. Mom. She rarely called, and when she did, it was always for birthdays or to check if I needed help with taxes. I answered. Her voice was small, tremulous. "I saw the video," she said, "and I saw everything I didn't want to see." Silence stretched. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have said something. I should have stopped it." I swallowed. "Why didn't you?" I thought if I stayed quiet he'd soften, that he'd come around. But I was wrong, and you paid the price. I didn't offer comfort. I wasn't ready. But I didn't hang up either. That night I stood in front of the mirror. Same face, same eyes, same quiet reflection. But something was different. For the first time, I didn't look for what was missing. I didn't wonder what I lacked. I just stood there, still, whole. I thought the aftermath would feel like victory. But once the applause faded, once the viral heat cooled, there was only quiet. And in that quiet, pain bloomed, not sharp like betrayal, but dull and constant, like a wound that had been ignored for too long. So I did something I'd always avoided. I asked for help. Therapy was awkward at first. I sat on the couch, arms crossed like my father, and said things like, "It wasn't that bad," or "I just overreacted." My therapist, Lena, just nodded, waited, until I finally cracked. "It's not about the hug," I said one day, voice shaking. "It's that I was never someone he wanted to love." That was the first time I cried without hiding it. She gave me homework, journaling, daily check-ins, identifying core beliefs. The pages filled quickly. Rage, grief, guilt, confusion. Some entries were just scribbles. Some were letters to my younger self. "You did nothing wrong," I wrote one night. "You were always worthy." Online, I found a support group for adult children of emotionally neglectful parents. At first, I just read the posts, lurked. But then I shared my story. Anonymously, of course. The responses poured in. "Same. God, thank you for writing this. Your words healed something in me." And slowly I started to believe that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about untangling yourself from it. That belief was tested the day I got an email from the university's psychology department. They were holding a panel on emotional neglect and wanted me to speak. I hesitated. I wasn't an expert. I was just a girl who'd been hurt. But maybe that was enough. I stood before a room of students, palms sweaty, throat tight. "I used to think that being invisible was my fault," I said. "That if I just worked harder, smiled brighter, stayed quieter, maybe I'd be seen. But visibility isn't a reward, it's a right." Afterward, a girl approached me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "I've never heard anyone say it out loud before." That night, I sat on my balcony, journal in lap, heart strangely still. I wasn't fixed, but I was healing. Then, the email came. Subject line, "Just once more, please read this." It was from him. My father. I didn't open it. Not at first, just stared at the subject line for hours. I thought about all the times I had waited for that kind of message. Now I didn't even know if I wanted it. I closed my laptop. The next day I went to the bookstore, and I started writing. The book was part memoir, part guide, part manifesto. I called it The Quiet Protest. It wasn't just about me. It was for every kid who'd ever dimmed their light to survive their own home. I wrote about performance as a survival strategy, about love as a currency, about how silence can be just as loud as violence. When it was published, I thought maybe a few people would find it. But within a month, it hit number 3 on Amazon's nonfiction list. I did podcast interviews, college tours. I even spoke at a national youth conference. And with the proceeds, I started something I'd only dreamed of before. A foundation, seen and heard. It offered mentorship, therapy grants, and online workshops for teens who'd grown up in homes like mine. We held our first summit 6 months later. At the closing, I told the crowd, "We are not broken. We are built differently. And that is our strength." Then came the twist. A producer from a national talk show reached out. "We're running a segment on parental reconciliation," she said. "Your father contacted us. He wants to apologize, live, on air, to make things right." She spoke as if this were a gift, but it didn't feel like one. It felt performative, manufactured, wrong. I declined. Not with anger, not with venom, just truth. "I don't need a televised apology," I wrote in my response. "I need him to learn how to be a father, privately, genuinely, and without applause." The network followed up twice. I never replied. Instead, I walked into the next session of Seen and Heard, looked at the group of teens staring back at me, and said, "Some wounds will never be validated by the person who caused them. So we have to learn to validate ourselves." Later that week, I opened his email. Just once. I read every word. There was sorrow in it. Maybe even sincerity. But I didn't write back. Forgiveness isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's just letting go of the weight so you can keep walking. The red circle under my feet felt smaller than I'd imagined. But the moment was bigger than any space could hold. The lights warmed my face as I stepped to the center of the TEDx stage. I could feel my heart pulsing in my throat. But it wasn't fear. It was presence. I was fully there, not hiding behind data or stories or someone else's approval. Just me. I looked out into the audience. Dozens of faces, strangers, students, survivors of things they hadn't said out loud yet. I could always tell. There's a look people wear when they've grown up learning how to shrink. I took a breath and began. There was a time I believed I was invisible, that my silence was my identity, my stillness my value, that love was something you had to earn, and that even when you did, some doors would never open. A pause. But no one is invisible in the story they are telling. Even if you are not seen by the people you hoped would see you, you are still the main character, still the one walking forward, still the one holding the pen. In the third row, a girl lowered her head and wiped her cheek. I kept going. Some of us spend our lives waiting for someone else to speak our worth into existence. But what if that someone is you? What if that moment is now? More silence. More stillness. Then the applause began. Not thunderous, not explosive, just steady, real. I nodded in gratitude and turned to leave the stage, but then something caught my eye. The back row, far right. He was there, my father. For once, not in the front, not where the cameras could see. He sat alone, hands resting on his knees, not moving. But he stayed. I met his eyes, briefly. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just looked. I offered the smallest smile I had, and turned back to the audience. That was enough. I didn't need a moment. I didn't need a hug. I didn't need closure that looked like a movie ending. I had myself. The months that followed were a blur of light. The book continued to rise, and one morning, I woke to an email titled, "Congratulations, Voice of the Year." I stared at the screen for 10 minutes before reading it. It was real. The ceremony was simple. No flash, no spectacle. Just voices being honored for being honest. I took the stage in a black dress, holding nothing but a folded piece of paper. "I never thought I'd be someone people listened to," I said. "But I think that's the trick. The people who never expect to speak are often the ones we most need to hear." And then came the part I had dreamed about. Not for me, but for what came after. The foundation was doing well. We'd launched new branches in 4 cities. Our online program had reached more than 30,000 teens. But this next step, was different. We launched the Scene Scholarship, a fund specifically for students who had grown up in environments of emotional neglect or familial favoritism. Students who had felt invisible. Students who had survived being second. The first class of recipients stood beside me at the press release. 12 students, diverse in every way, but united by one thing. Their stories had once been silent, not anymore. Each held a copy of The Quiet Protest in one hand, and in the other, a letter they'd written to their younger selves. I read mine out loud. "You thought love had to be earned, but love that demands performance isn't love. It's control. You were never too quiet, too much, too distant. You were never the problem. You were the light." The crowd stood, not for me, for them, for all of us. Later that night, after the event, I sat alone on my balcony, the city buzzing beneath me. I looked up at the stars, dim but present, and I whispered something I'd never said out loud. "I forgive you." I wasn't sure who it was for. My father, myself, the younger me who had waited too long to hear what she deserved. Maybe all of them. Maybe none. The next morning I opened my laptop to finish my next manuscript, and I smiled at the dedication page. "To those who were told they were too quiet, you are the revolution." And as the words appeared on the screen, I felt it again. That sense of peace, of knowing. I wasn't a shadow anymore. I was the one casting light.